Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Cognizance, Upheaval, out September 24th on Prosthetic Records. This album has 10 tracks, 33 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a technical death metal band from the UK. Now, the structure of this album is definitely one of the highlights of the record, because if you have an album that has this sort of sound, this steamrolling aspect of really pounding you with aggression, with technicality from the beginning all the way to the end, you want to make sure the album plays itself well, that has playability, that is engaging, and that doesn't feel a little bit redundant across a few songs. There's not a lot of room to play with when you're looking at 10 tracks in 33 minutes, so you have to be precise in terms of how you create this record, how you create the soundscape that's going to drive the experience, and how you're going to put it all together in the overall structure. So I felt like they did a wonderful job creating songs that have a sense of continuity from one into the other, or at least a transition from one to the other. Doesn't feel broken, doesn't feel like there's a gap there. It's just a forward motion. Every track is taking you towards that same finish line, so there's a sense of continuity. Very important. You could have a few nuances within the tracks themselves, but the fact that the album is moving, that it doesn't pause, that it doesn't break, that it feels continuous across all 10 songs in 33 minutes adds to the overall experience. When you get to the end, you feel like you didn't get enough. You need to go back again and listen to it again. So for an album like this, you need that sort of experience. You need that sort of track listing, that sort of structure that really amplifies the quality of the record, the quality of the songs, and increases the overall playability that the album has. Once you get into the soundscape, technical death metal is the root sound within the album. That is what drives everything else, but it's not just a typical technical death metal album that just depends on one aspect in order to drive the overall experience, in order to drive the soundscape and even the atmosphere of the songs. I felt like this album offered a little bit more diversity of sound throughout. That makes the album a little bit more rich, a little bit more easy to understand, a little bit more easier to process. And it also makes the technical side of the record really jump out, because it's not something that you start to become familiar with song in and song out. It comes in different places throughout the record. It comes at different times, allowing other elements like a little bit more groove coming in here and there, a little bit more melody coming in here and there. And all of these elements coming together at different times from different angles allow the record to have a sense of consistency, but at the same time sound slightly different from song to song and have a different atmosphere from song to song. Within the soundscape, three elements that I have to mention, and that is the bass, guitars, and drums. If I start off with the bass, I have to say that perhaps is the weakest spot on the album. I wanted a little bit more of the bass in the forefront. I felt like on this record the bass was too much in the back seat of this ride, and I wanted it not necessarily always in the forefront. I didn't want it necessarily always riding shotgun, but I definitely wanted the bass having more of a predominant role, a few tracks here and there, in order to create some ebbs and flows throughout the tracks, in order to give the listener something that sounds completely different from everything else, and that ignites the overall experience and makes the album feel a little bit more rich overall as far as the sound goes. And when you look at a record that has 33 minutes in length, I feel like they could have found a place for it throughout these 10 songs that would make the album jump off a little bit more and not necessarily feel as compact as it does. The drums, on the other hand, were very balanced. You're not always going to get the same out of them, but the goal is always the same on every single song. So sometimes they're going to be a little bit more aggressive, sometimes they're going to drop a little bit more into the background, but in terms of creating the foundation, in terms of creating that roadmap that exists on this album, that red line that connects the whole record through, the drums are playing a huge role in that perspective. They are the element that gives you a sense of continuity, gives you a sense of balance, because while being slightly different from song to song, or even within songs themselves, the fact that the execution is always flawless, is always at the right spot at the right time, with the right sound, with the right tone, really gives this album a sense of grounding and substance that's really important for what the guitar is going to do next. And what the guitars are going to do on this album is having that technical side present there, but also bringing other elements that make the sound feel a little bit more diverse, make the sound feel a little bit more palpable, and making the overall record, while being a very heavy album, really easy to understand, really easy to digest, and for the listener to really break down all the different layers that it has across all of the different elements. The vocals, on the other hand, also offer a sense of consistency throughout. There's not a lot of variations, or almost no variations at all. So the vocals are able to be that glue that holds everything else together, that keeps the album compact, and it's really the box that wraps everything else in it. So that sense of consistency is also important for a record that has this sort of structure, that has this sort of sound, and that has this sort of diversity in terms of what the guitars are doing. So I really enjoy the vocals, I enjoy the tone, I enjoy the delivery, and I enjoy that consistency that it brought to the overall experience. This is a really strong second album by Cognizance. I really felt like this album had a lot of strength in it. If you look at the vocals, if you look at the overall sound, the construction of the album is absolutely magnificent. I don't think you can build an album like this and go any longer than what this album is without losing yourself a little bit in it, and not in a positive way. So the strength of this record resides in two places. It resides in the strength of the overall structure that they created for the album, and it resides in the little bit of diversity that's given into the technical death metal side of the band that really makes this album feel a little bit more rich towards the listener in terms of what you're going to get out of it. The deficiency on the album, like I said earlier, in my opinion, is really the bass. I wanted it to have a more of a predominant role. It doesn't. It has more of a secondary role. It's fine, but I think the album would have been even richer in sound if the bass was a little bit more in the forefront here and there throughout the record. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Hymns, opening track on the album. Really groovy riff as this song starts, and that kind of sets the tone for what this album is going to be all about, which is a technical death metal album that still has a lot of groove, a lot of melody built into it. It doesn't live off just of the technicality of the sound of the guitars. There's other elements that add spice, that add flavor to the overall soundscape. This song really represents that well, and this is the opening track, so it gives you an idea that this album is going to be a very different journey that you're going to encounter versus other technical death metal records that fall under more of the prism of staying connected with one aspect and one aspect only. I love this song. You have the technical side still present there. You have the groovy side present there. These two start to interweave with one another from the beginning all the way to the end, and you start to see the sound morphing, building, connecting these two sides of the band, and finding a way of coexisting from beginning to end, with the vocals keeping everything together, keeping everything concise, and not allowing the song to fall apart with all of these dynamics that are happening internally. The closing solo is such a nice touch to finish off the song with a solo. I absolutely love it. I wasn't expecting, I thought we were not going to get a solo on this track, and then the solo hits, and it just felt so perfect for this song. And that's something that you can also say about the guitars. The solos throughout this record are impeccable, always adding value to the songs, always feeling like they're an extension of what the track is giving to the listener, not just something that was thought on the outside and then brought in as an insert into how you construct a song. It has a lot more life, it has a lot more meaning to the way these songs come across, and this one is a perfect example in how it ends and how it puts that exclamation mark on this track. Next you have Drifting Revolution. A little bit of a thicker song all around. It has a heavier sound, it has a bigger sound. The solo adds melody and it gives the song a slightly different flavor when it comes in, but overall it doesn't break away from how heavy the whole track is. It doesn't break away from the overall volume that this song has. That heaviness does not hide also the technical side of this track. The technical side of the track is able to jump into the forefront and play an important role on the construction of the song and how this song is driven from beginning all the way to the end. I felt that on this track specifically, the vocals added more atmosphere, still the glue that holds it all together, but they also added a very nice atmosphere, so making this a very consistent song throughout. Last but not least, Fever Dream, a more technical track, at least as it starts. I like that approach. It's a different style. It's a different way to get the listener into the song. It still has the heavy drums behind it. I felt that on this song, the drums perhaps jump a little bit more into the forefront. So you have the heavy drums, you have the technical side on the guitars. The two are really working in parallel in order to create that heavy volume, that heavy sound, that heavy presence that this track has, making it a bigger song in terms of what you have to digest, of what you have to process when you're listening to it. It's not as direct, it's not as driven. It has a lot more to give, and it's because of that consistency between the drums and guitars and how they're moving in parallel together throughout from beginning all the way to the end, creating a heavy soundscape to creating a heavy presence. The vocals pack even more heaviness on top already of the sound and everything else that is happening. The footprint of this song just becomes super large, becomes very big. Is a track that feels like it's almost expanding as you progress through into it. This is it. Cognizance for their latest record, Upheaval, out September 24th on Prosthetic Records. Let us know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.